I'm Alan Combs. Welcome back to our microphones. Richard Dawkins, scientist, internationally best-selling author, known for The God Illusion, among other books, and now Brief Candle in the Dark, Appetite for Wonder, The Selfish Gene, your other books. But this is an interesting kind of memoir, right?
It is. It's the second volume of my memoirs. The first volume was An Appetite for Wonder, which took me up to the age of 35, and that was done chronologically. Brief Candle in the Dark is not chronological. It hops about, it digressions. One of the things I say is if you don't like digressions, you may be reading the wrong book.
Why the title Brief Candle in the Dark? Is that because our existence is so
it's
minuscule?
Shakespeare, out brief candle, life's but a walking shadow.
You get asked all the time about your religious beliefs, or should I say lack thereof. Do you get tired of that line of questioning?
Yes, rather. There's very little of it in Brief Candle in the Dark. It's mostly about my scientific career and career as an educator as well.
But you also talk about the reaction to the God illusion and the way you've been treated as a result. I mean, that's part of your life story.
Yes, I couldn't avoid it. It's part of the life story, and I had to put it in. But it's a comparatively small part of the book.
So you see yourself as a scientist, but then again, science and religion is such a fascinating topic. And I got to tell you, here in this country, I don't know how much you follow American politics. It's almost unavoidable, right?
Yes.
And you've got a bunch of politicians running for office, particularly on the right, and you can't love God enough, can you? I mean, it is
amazing. Not just that, they're all creationists, which really is, actually, it's disgraceful. I mean, the fact that one of the two major political parties, every single candidate, I think except one, actually says they don't believe in evolution. They don't believe in the fundamental principle of biology, which is a fact.
And when Marco Rubio, I think, was over the other side of the pond where you are, was asked about it, and he wouldn't even commit to an answer about whether he believed in evolution.
Yes.
That's got to be, I mean, as a scientist, you look at the stuff, you got to be scratching your head.
Yes, because many people who are religious, Catholics and Anglicans and people, they all accept evolution.
So in this book, take us through it. I mean, what is it you want to impart to your reader about your life and how you intersect with science?
It is just a memoir, so it's descriptive of what happened in thematic terms. It's not chronological. So I've got a chapter on television. There's a chapter on debates. There's a chapter on my Christmas lectures. It's just an account of my life. I met some pretty interesting people. Lots of funny anecdotes about them.
You also talk about some of your early history, even to earlier than 32, going to boarding school, cold baths, and beatings.
Well, that was in the first volume.
I'm sorry, this is the first one.
That's in the first volume. Yes, I had a British boarding school education, and we did have cold baths, we did have beatings, with a cane, quite severe beatings.
How does that impact you?
Not permanently. It's
psychologically?
No, I don't think so.
Not really?
No, I don't think so.
And in terms of the people you talk about in your book, who are some of the intellectual minds you like interacting with? And tell me about those relationships.
Well, some of them are famous, some of them are not. I describe my work on digger wasps with Jane Brockman and Alan Graffen fairly early on. Alan Graffen is a colleague at Oxford now. He was a student of mine. He became a mentor of mine, one of the cleverest people I've ever met.
A student who becomes a mentor.
Yes.
That's a fascinating trajectory.
Yeah. Yes, it is, and I'm quite proud of that. I'm quite proud to have a student who became my mentor, and
Do you hold salons where you get together with these people and?
Not so much anymore. I used to, yes.
Yeah. So, it's hard for me to get away from the God delusion because that so much speaks to what we talk about here in this country. What is the reaction to you still as a result of you continue to be talked about with Sam Harris and the late Christopher Hitchens, that triumvirate of people who more than anybody else has put forth a secular idea?
Yes, you might be surprised that when I go into the Bible Belt in America, I get very enthusiastic receptions.
Really?
I very seldom get heckled. I find that thousands of people
You're not Satan to these people?
Well, I may be, but they don't turn up to my events. And so the people who do tend to feel beleaguered, and they feel grateful. They line up to have their book signed, and every single one of them says, "Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming to, Arkansas, wherever it is."
Could anything happen to change your point of view on religion?
Of course, yes. Just show me some evidence, and I'll change.
Do you think people who have faith are some kind of is there a mental problem? Are they mentally ill, mentally imbalanced?
Well, it's hard to use the word mentally ill when there are so many of them, but if they believed what they did and they were the only one, they would undoubtedly be called mentally ill, yes.
Really? So, I mean,
Don't you think?
But there are so many of them that that would be the majority of people, right?
That's true, yes. Well, yes, it is a majority in America, not in Western Europe.
Not as much. We went away. It's funny because we left the motherland where you are to get away from this stuff.
Exactly, and that's why the American Constitution is written in secular terms. In Madison's words, precisely to get away from the bloodbaths that religion inflicted on Europe.
So, since the opposite has happened, you've got these politicians all trying to embrace, and you've got, for example, Ben Carson. I don't know if you've been following him. It says, well, as long as we'd be okay with a Muslim in office, as long as that person rejected the tenets of that faith. But if you said that about Christianity or Judaism, they'd be run out.
Certainly,
run out.
I mean, it is a paradox in a way that America is such a religious country, despite its secular foundation.
You've done a tweet which got fairly controversial about I think it was Nobel Prizes and the number of Muslims who won versus those of other faiths.
It started out as a comparison with Jews because the number of Nobel Prizes in science won by Jews is astoundingly high. It's getting on for a quarter of all Nobel Prizes have been won by Jews, and essentially almost none. I think one by Muslims.
Why do you think that is?
I've no idea, but I mean the number of Jews in the world is tiny compared to the number of Muslims in the world. So it's got to be something interesting, and I don't know what it is.
As a scientist, though, have you ever looked at or wondered why certain people of certain backgrounds or religions gravitate to certain Jews in the diamond business, Koreans in the food business?
Yes, I don't have much of an idea about that. No, I mean, it must be something about the culture, but I don't know what it is about it.
Is one religious culture, though, sicker than another, more toxic than another? Because in this country, certainly since 9/11, the debate about Islam has been furious.
I don't think it's unfair to say that if we're looking for the maximum toxicity in religions in the world, it's got to be Islam, yes.
Why is that?
I have no idea. I mean, it's partly that they are taught to believe that the Quran is literally true, and the Quran does, just like the Bible.
But there are fundamentalist Christians who believe that as well.
Well, there are, but they're not that numerous. I mean, the Bible itself is as toxic as the Quran, but most Christians are not taught to believe it literally. Most Christians are taught to believe it metaphorically or allegorically.
Richard Dawkins is our guest, and his new book is really kind of the second memoir he's written, Brief Candle in the Dark, My Life in Science. What got you fascinated? I mean, when your first book was not about religion, what got you fascinated about science in the first place? You couldn't have predicted you would become this symbol, I guess, of non-religiosity. Right?
I am fascinated by science because science explains things. I mean, that if you want to understand the world, if you want to understand the universe, if you want to understand humanity, science is the way to do it, and it is fascinating to live.
Was there a key moment as a child that kind of said, this is really what I want to be?
Not really. I mean, not really until I got to Oxford as an undergraduate did I really become fascinated.
What happened there that turned you on so much?
I got interested in the philosophical aspects. I got interested in the questions, the fundamental questions of existence. Why do we exist? Why are we here? And I realized that evolutionary science is the answer.
So evolution is the reason we're here. In other words, we're not here for us, for the moment, but for what that could eventually be.
We can make our own aims. We can say, I am here to do whatever I like doing, play music or make love or write poetry, whatever it is. We can make our own purposes. But the fundamental reason we're here, well, greater in the sense of more fundamental. The reason we are here is natural selection that has built our brains and our bodies.
And you've written about Darwin in a way that nobody else has, for example. The way you described evolution, those who don't know would say, well, I was never a monkey. I mean, and they get insulted.
Yeah.
How can you explain to creationists, of whom there are too many in this country, including, it seems like, the entire right wing, in a way that might convince them that they have it all wrong about this?
I might have to have a little bit of time. I've written 12 books
yes,
on it. It's not easy to do in a very short time, but it's not a thing that you can actually seriously disbelieve. It's a fact. There are plenty of things in science where there's genuine controversy, where it's uncertain. But in the case of evolution, it is certainly a fact.
So, evolutionary theory, it's only a theory, but it goes beyond theory.
No, it is a fact. They're using the word theory as though it meant hypothesis, which it doesn't. It's a fact.
What makes something a fact? Is there the scientific method?
Overwhelming evidence. I mean, technically speaking, philosophers of science will say you can only ever fail to disprove something, but there comes a point where it's just simply perverse to object to calling it a fact.
So what the creationists, obviously you've written, as you've said, many books on this, and it's something we can't do in a short interview. What's the best argument, though, against their statement that, you know, and creationism, if obviously, is a word that they've created to make it sound more benign than it really is?
I think the best argument probably is molecular genetics, because you've got literal letters of the alphabet. There are 4 letters in this alphabet, A, T, C, and G, and there are millions, billions of these letters in each animal's genetic code, and you can compare the genetic letters in any 2 animals you like, and you find that humans and chimpanzees are almost exactly the same. And there are obviously there are differences, but in terms of the proportion of letters that are the same, it's very, very high. Humans and kangaroos are a bit more different. Humans and mushrooms are more different still. I mean, you've got a hierarchy of resemblance which you can actually quantify, actually write down the numbers of letters in common, and it's a pedigree.
What do we look like 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now?
The same. 2,000 years is too short a time for any significant change in our bodies.
How long a time must there be for there to be a
maybe 100,000 years, maybe 500,000
Will we
years.
even be here?
That's another question. Most species that have ever lived have gone extinct. There's a good chance we won't be extinct because we've got the technology to survive.
So if we do survive, and it's 100, 200,000 years from now, is there any way to predict what that looks like?
I wouldn't attempt to predict it. If you look at the past 3 million years, the biggest change that's happened up to today is an increase in brain size. Well, that's not going to change. That's not going to increase, at least, unless those individuals with the biggest brains have the most children, because that's the way it works. And there's no evidence.
Does a bigger brain mean you're more intelligent?
Not necessarily, but whatever has happened in the past 3 million years, the brain has grown very, very massively, and that's got to mean that those individuals with the bigger brains have had more children, probably because they survive better, but maybe because they're more sexually attractive, something like that.
So you don't think we're going to destroy ourselves?
I didn't say that. We might well destroy ourselves.
I mean, the technology you talked about that might enable us to survive could the opposite. Could actually happen.
Exactly. It could go both ways. The high technology could either destroy us or save us.
You've talked about having been, was it at Liberty University, where you were told that there was some kind of a dinosaur part from like a few thousand years old?
I was actually at Randolph-Macon Women's College, which is in the same town, Lynchburg, Virginia. And the Liberty University bussed over a crowd of people, and they rather monopolized the microphone. Very polite, very, very respectful. But one of them did say, "We've got a dinosaur in our museum, which is dated 3,000 years ago." I think I said something like, well, if you've got a museum that says it's got a dinosaur that's 3,000 years old, you need to go to a better university. And the women of Randolph-Macon really loved that.
Did you ask to go see it?
A proper university, I think I said.
Did they offer to show it to you?
No, they didn't. But I'd have liked to go and see it, yes.
It would have been nice to ask for proof.
Yeah.
Will there be another part of another memoir, another part of your life that you want to talk about?
Depends how long I live, I suppose.
You're not going anywhere, right? What is it you still would like to do?
I would like to continue my life as an educator and as a learner. I mean, learning more about science.
Well, you still feel you've got a lot to learn. That's
oh yes, we've all still got a lot to learn. Yes, there's a lot to learn.
The latest book is Brief Candle in the Dark. It's almost sad when I read that. It's like brief. We are a brief candle.
Well, that's right. I mean, it is Shakespeare. It's Macbeth. It's out brief candle. But the second half of the title, Candle in the Dark, that's Carl Sagan. Science has a candle in the dark. So that's the upbeat part of the title.
Richard Dawkins, I thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
And we're back in a moment at 877-367-2526.